What's going on, Seaport? It's Pac-Man Jones with Savannah Seaport News. Now, I seem to have a update to the death of Christopher Starks. It seems like there is an ending to all of this because Justin Stevens was previously charged with felony murder, but on Tuesday, the man who killed a former DeKalb County football standout at Savannah State University pled guilty to a lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter, according to Chatham County court records. Now, Justin Stevens was sentenced Tuesday to 20 years, including just 3 in prison, but he'll just be credited with time that he's already served since his arrest in April 2018, meaning his sentence will be probation only. The plea deal closed the criminal case against Stevens, but the family of Christopher Jamal Starks, shot and killed on August 27, 2015, says that this is not a harsh enough sentence. We are incredibly disappointed by today's announcement of a plea deal for the killer of our son, Ray and Sharon Starks said in an emailed statement. It is outrageous that this man could walk onto a college campus into a student union, shoot our son in cold blood, and then be released with what amounts to a slap on the wrist. Christopher Starks, who age was 22, was in the student center on campus when he was shot during a fight, according to the police. He died at the hospital. The shooting prompted an outcry of safety on college campuses, with student and parents voicing concerns on social media. With a new school year just underway, Savannah State leaders vowed to increase security on campus to keep students and staff safe. Those were coming on campus were required to show identification. Nearly 3 years later, in April 2018, the GBI announced the arrest in the case. Stevens, then 23, was arrested on charges including felony murder, aggravated assault, and firearm offenses after being indicted in the case. Stevens was not a Savannah State student. In July 2019, Stevens' murder trial ended up with a deadlocked jury. Defense attorney had argued that it was not Stevens who fired that fatal shot during that fight in a crowded area. A second trial was planned before he agreed to a plea deal. Now, Starks graduated in 2012 from Miller Grove High School in Lithonia, where he played football and competed in track and field. As a senior, he had 26 receptions for 453 yards as a wide receiver and recorded 16 tackles on defense. He signed a scholarship to play football at Appalachian State University, but later transferred to Savannah State. An aspiring rapper, Starks performed under the stage name Bully Boo and had recorded a song in Atlanta studio before his death. And I'm going to read a document from the Supreme Court of Georgia versus Stevens. This document was written in October of last year, 2020. Now, it says the state of appeals, the trial court ordered partially denying its motion to include relevant and probative evidence, which sought a pretrial ruling on admissibly on 2 photographs for use at Justin Stevens' second trial for the murder of Christopher Starks. One of those photographs purportedly depicts Stevens with a gun in his hand, labeled as Exhibit 1. The other photograph depicts Stevens' girlfriend as she points a handgun at the camera, and Stevens in the background holding what the state describes as a silver gun magazine labeled as Exhibit 2. The trial court ruled that the Exhibit 2 was inadmissible during Stevens' first trial, and again found it to be inadmissible in denying the state's motion to introduce Exhibit 2 at the second trial, because we conclude that the trial court did not abuse its discretion in determining that Exhibit 2 was irrelevant. The evidence from the first trial shows that the shooting occurred after 2 groups of men, including Starks and the other including Stevens, faced off against one another. Several witnesses testified that when a third party punched Stevens, Stevens hit Starks, and the witness heard a gunshot. In statements given to law enforcement near the time of the murder, several witnesses identified Stevens as the shooter or gave description of the shooter that matched Stevens' height. The firearm used to shoot Starks was never recovered, but the evidence at the first trial showed that during the law enforcement investigation into the shooting, one witness described the weapon as a black pistol and another described it as a big and black and as a 40 or 45 caliber gun. Stevens' girlfriend testified that the only gun Stevens owned was a 22 caliber pistol he had purchased for himself. when the state attempted to introduce Exhibit 2 photograph during the girlfriend's testimony, Stephen's counsel objected on the grounds that it was irrelevant and impermissible character evidence. The trial court sustained the objection, stating that the photograph was irrelevant because there was nothing linking the gun in the photograph to Starks' murder, and the photograph simply depicted Stevens with a gun magazine, not a weapon. After asking Stephen's girlfriend a few additional questions, elicited evidence that Stephen's girlfriend and he were not speaking at the time of the shooting, the prosecutor tried a second time to introduce the photograph into evidence, and the trial court again ruled that it was inadmissible. Less than a month after the first trial ended in a mistrial, Chatham County Grand Jury indicted Stevens on the same offenses in a superseding indictment. The state elected to proceed a trial on the superseding indictment and filed a motion seeking to introduce Exhibits 1 and 2 into evidence at a trial. In its motion, the state represented that during an interview with the GBI, Stevens had identified himself as a man holding the gun in Exhibit 1, and he identified the gun as belonging to his late brother. The state also represented that on September 3rd, 2015, a GBI special agent performed a search on Stephen's girlfriend's Twitter account and found the Exhibit 2 photograph posted to the account, and that in a police interview, Stephen's girlfriend identified the man holding the gun in the magazine and Exhibit 2 as Stevens, and identified herself as the woman pointing the gun. The state contended that the two photographs were admissible. The state also asserted that the guns depicted in the two photographs appeared to be strikingly similar, and the fact that Stevens had a large tattoo on his arm in the one in the picture and not in the other stood for the proposition that Stevens was in possession of or had access to the firearm over some period of time, which was more than a few days. According to the state, these factors demonstrated that these photographs were relevant and that their probative impact was not outweighed by prejudice. The trial court denied the motion without hearing, finding that Exhibit 2 was not relevant, and rejected that state's contention that Exhibit 1 showing Stevens with a gun in his hand made Exhibit 2 any more probative. The trial court concluded that Exhibit 2 was irrelevant and inadmissible, and reserved ruling on Exhibit 1. And honestly, this is a 19-page document. If you want to see the link for this document, I'll post that link in a video description box so you can see the whole document in its whole entirety. But what was important in this whole document was that the gun was never found by investigators. The gun was never found, and they couldn't use, like I said, Exhibit 1 and 2, the pictures of them holding the gun and the magazine in the picture. They couldn't use that at all. So, and I don't know what else to say, because this family has not seen justice at all.